Hello, my name's Leigh Morris. I'm CEO of Manx Wildlife Trust. I commenced my role as the CEO on 13th of January, so in terms of annual reporting for 2019-20, I was just in post for about 18 days of the last reporting year. So much of the initial part of this presentation is about 2019-20 in terms of the annual report for our AGM, but then I also want to move on to cover a little bit about the outline of our new strategy, our Strategy 2020, a bit about how we coped remarkably well with COVID-19 lockdown as a team, and also to finish up with a little bit about Team Manx Wildlife Trust and how we and I hope you'll all be a strong part of that going forward into the future. So first of all, we're going to start. This is Graham Makepeace-Warne, our MWT Marketing and Membership Manager. And in terms of highlights for 2019, it saw basically a key element was the consolidation of our membership database, and much of this work was done brilliantly well by one of our volunteers, John Howie. We now have a total of 685 individual members registered with Manx Wildlife Trust, but that doesn't include family members, and also a total corporate membership value of about £12,000 now. In terms of other highlights, key was a £5,000 funding that we received from Selton Manx, which is going to help build a public or maybe an adult assault course in Ramsey Forest as part of that project there, and also the wonderful support we've been given by the co-op in the north of the island, and much of that has been organised and driven and championed by, again, one of our volunteers, Ian Davies. Our communication work gained pace through the year, and as well as press and social media, our whole digital comms has developed during 2019 and 20. And also we had a successful grant application to the Royal Society for Wildlife Trusts that's actually provided us funding for additional days employment for some of our team. That's an additional day for Graham in his role, but also to fund for 2 days a week a communications assistant who's actually now in post, Rachel Harrop, or Ray as we call her, but in terms of 2019-20, we gained the money then to appoint someone later on in 2020, but a great step forward. Our Manx Nature magazine continued to improve also. Two highlights. This picture shows the Wilder Future Roadshow, which gained great recognition in various locations around the Isle of Man, that included the Ramsey Courthouse, at the Festival of the Sea that we run in Port Erin, and also at Ronaldsway Airport. I must also point out on this picture my predecessor, Tim Graham, who was CEO of Manx Wildlife Trust before me. Tim left in November 2019 and is now the CEO of another wildlife trust, Leicestershire and Rutland. And we all wish Tim all the best, and I've already had some communications and engaged with Tim in wider wildlife trust meetings. So it's great to still have him as a contact and a friend. In terms of our nature reserves, these are managed by Tricia Sale and assisted wonderfully by our volunteer team of midweek muckers. Small team works on Tuesday, and then the main team works on Thursdays right through the year, and we average over 15 muckers coming every week on a Thursday, which is amazing. And having joined them 3 or 4 times already before lockdown, they're a wonderful group, and like all our volunteers do amazing things for us as a charity. In terms of other groups engaging with our nature reserves, we also had a children's community centre farm, a watch event, special education needs, adults, various schools, and rainbows and brownies. So very, very diverse range of audiences who are visiting our nature reserves during 2019-20. In terms of botanical highlights, the pictures you can see there, one is to indicate the record numbers of pyramidal orchid at Cronky Bin, and also the common twayblade orchids, which were recorded at Goshen for the first time during the reporting year. 2 more botanical highlights is the increased spread of cranberry at Dalby, and an increased diversity at Glendew, with spotted orchids now recorded in all the fields. And there's been a great project developing in Manx Wildlife Trust nature reserves around biodiversity recording, particularly around inverts, and some wonderful volunteers have been a key role in that. But amazingly, it just shows you in terms of biodiversity and how special the Isle of Man is that they've found new species, and they range from different new fungi for the Isle of Man, new species for the island. So that would be new fungi, new spiders, new money spiders, and particularly a comb-footed spider, although I don't have a picture to show you of that. In terms of our education, this is led by Dawn Dickens, and Dawn's time changed a little bit during 2019-20, where she now has 3 days that are ring-marked for delivery of an education programme, particularly around schools but also for adults, and that's for the Isle of Man government for both DESC and DEFA. And then the other 2 days Dawn's been focused around Citizen Science Project in a project funded by Manx Lottery Trust. In total, these are wonderful stats. So 8,309 people attended events run by Dawn last year, which basically included a total of 54 different schools and community groups, as well as adults and public and children just dropping in on various drop-in sessions. I think that's an amazing achievement by one person, and I know Dawn will always try and fit more groups in, so wonderful asset. A key element of Dawn's delivery, and it's something that I've very much picked up on, and I have some background in education in different places, but Dawn has a real passion for getting people outside in nature, and if she can get a group outside, get their hands dirty or wet, she does it. And also another thing that started last year that we're now carrying on into this year is evolving our delivery to better support the island in delivering eco-schools, and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in schools. So that was a key thing that started for Dawn last year, and it will go on into this year. The Wildflowers of Man project, led by Andre Doubledam, and this is again as a project that's evolved over the years. I'm already aware that there used to be a nursery in St John's, and there's been a huge amount of native plants that have been propagated and planted back into the Isle of Man environment over the years by Andre and volunteers and other MWT staff. The focus now for Wildflowers of Man is very much the Ramsey Forest project, and you will see, I won't say too much now, but you will see certainly over the next 1 or 2 years, our ambition is that really becomes a flagship project for the Isle of Man, both in terms of conservation but also public engagement. Other highlights from Andre during 2019-20 would include the Clabane plantation, where there was an acre of native woodland created, and also 10 rare native plants were reintroduced. And Andre is also in the process of completing the text of what will in effect become the Isle of Man Wildflower Atlas, the flora of the Isle of Man. And again, personally, having spent 10 years in botanical gardens, I think that would be amazing if there was an Isle of Man flora that goes to press. So although we need to find the funding to do it, I think the data is there and we'll find a way to do it. Marine conservation, led by Dr. Laura Howe, and Laura's work includes a whole range of projects across the marine, and actually now this year branching out is also into freshwater. And 2 of the days in 1920 for Laura were spent supporting work of the government through DEFA, working closely with Peter Duncan around marine conservation and the development of the island's marine nature reserves. Other highlights include the Seagrass Program. So seeds were actually collected from some of the seagrass on the east coast and have been taken away by Swansea University. And the aim is, or the hope is, and the belief is that some of those will actually come back and be translocated into areas so that we can start to expand the area of seagrass again in the Isle of Man. The Festival of the Sea, I'm looking forward to that this year. I'm delighted that that's not, it's been moved because of COVID-19, not cancelled, so I'm very much looking forward to being part of that. But last year we had around 3,000 people attended over the 2 days. Another great range of animals kept in the tuck tanks, and I'm told a particular interest in the edible crabs. The Calf of Man, owned by Manx National Heritage, has been something that Manx Wildlife Trust have supported both through individual work of Lara but also through the M&H Bird Observatory contract for several years. And last year there were a total of 282 bird species recorded in the calf, and 60 of which are bred on the calf. And I must again mention our volunteers. Volunteers is something that appears right through the work of Manx Wildlife Trust, and the work that the volunteers have done on the calf has been amazing and has enabled us to get to those figures. In terms of notable bird species, there was the first sighting, or the first record of a white-tailed eagle on the Calf, and also the first spring records of melodious warbler since 2005, sorry, and only the fourth or fifth calf records of the western subalpine warbler. In total, another great stat, 8,088 birds were ringed in 2019-20, which is actually the highest, or the second highest total ever achieved by the Bird Observatory. So brilliant work. Annual seal surveys continued on the Calf. 69 seal pups were born, and that's the second highest total since the surveys began. And in total, 302 females and 46 males have been identified, with some still to be identified. So that we know that there's more there. The Puffin Project. Some of you will know that we're trying to encourage puffins once again to nest on the Calf, and a key element of that has been playing puffin calls and putting decoy birds out to try and attract birds in. And the speaker system was revamped over the winter, and 10 new decoy puffins have put in place. So again, these are all steps forward to Calf of Man puffins. It's not all birds on the Calf. I know I visited recently and was amazed to work with the wardens, Aaron and Rob, when they actually were going through the night before's moth trap. So some spectacular species, some of which I don't mind admitting I've never seen, and in total there was just over 13,000 moths were trapped on the Calf in 2019-20 of over 200 species. I think 211 species in total, including 8 new species for the Calf, so 8 new records of moths. So it's not just birds, Lepidoptera as well. We're now going to move on and talk a little bit about our Manx Myres, or Upland Peats, and also volunteer coordination. And Manx Wildlife Trust received funding, 12 months funding, to appoint Sarah Hickey on a 1-year contract from August 2019 to deliver a split role. The bulk of Sarah's time, or just over 50%, has been spent doing upland peat surveying, and Sarah's work, in short, has been going out with a probe and a GPS unit and a notebook, and she is literally measuring the depth of peat across the whole of the Isle of Man's upland peat areas. And this will give us really crucially important baseline data. With that data, knowing the depths, knowing the area, there's roughly about 10,000 hectares of upland peat, and with that data we can start to estimate the entire volume of upland peat that there is in the Isle of Man, and also from that baseline data that we can then start developing monitoring programs, restoration programs, maintenance programs, etc. for the peat as part of the island's climate change plan. So crucial work. The other half of Sarah's time has been allocated to the coordination of volunteers. As I've mentioned, we have amazing volunteers across all our areas of work, from the office to the Calf to the muckers to the wonderful team that runs the shop for our commercial arm, Wildlife Limited. So Sarah's not coming in to change any of that, but very much to coordinate it. So we'll have some generic ways, a way hopefully that more people will be able to come and volunteer with us, and just ways that we can hopefully look after our volunteers better and enable them better. So Sarah's role has been that, and a little part of that has been actually getting volunteers to come out and work on the upland peat surveying with her, including upland farmers, which is wonderful, and more about farmers later. I should now mention COVID-19. So 2 months into my role as CEO at Manx Wildlife Trust, we went into COVID-19 lockdown. So after 3 months of that, it actually became, for me, the norm of the Isle of Man. But I really want to put on record externally just how delighted and impressed I've been with the whole of Manx Wildlife Trust in terms of how they've responded really, really positively to the COVID-19 lockdown. It certainly impacted on us, from our shop closing, from our trading arm. Our visitor centres closed, our midweek muckers stopped, people had to home work, pretty much all our face-to-face fundraising events, school sessions were all cancelled, and rightly so. But when you see, or when I reflect now back on how the team responded, so Digital now is not a problem. We've gone from, I wonder if we can have an online meeting, to it's the norm now. We send out an invite, we're all on the same screen. Digital magazines, Graham and Ray and many others have launched our new website with now a .im URL, which we're delighted with. The shop's got Perspex in and social distancing, and it really was a successful period for us in terms of learning new ways of working, getting through some of the backlog, etc. So I think we've come back out of it now in a far stronger position than we went in. And although it has impacted on us financially, it would be wrong of me not to say that. I think as a team, we and they did remarkably well. Now, one of the things that we did during lockdown was to develop our new strategy. The existing Manx Wildlife Trust, or should I say previous Manx Wildlife Trust strategy, had an end date of 2020, so it was always on my forward job plan from the board to lead our strategic process. So when COVID lockdown came in, we took the decision to carry on regardless, and did this through a series of online meetings with staff, with trustees and with other stakeholders on the island who came in and joined us for a series of workshops and then subsequent various drafts and discussions, etc., etc. Again, tremendous engagement. I'm particularly proud of how the team engaged and coped with doing it online. Not a perfect world, but worked well. And so from our strategy now, it's clear, or some of the things as you see that rolling out. So what I'd first like to talk about is, in terms of this slide, is that our prime function, first and foremost, is to champion Manx wildlife for the future. We are Manx Wildlife Trust. We're in the Isle of Man, and that is first and foremost our priority. However, there is a however, and the however is that if you look at a map of the British Isles, we're slap bang in the middle of it, and we're also slap bang in the middle of the Irish Sea. So strategically for the British Isles, and importantly for us as a wildlife trust, one of 46 wildlife trusts across the British Isles, we're actually in a really important place in terms of data sets, etc., linking across the whole wildlife trust and British Isles. And then globally, we are a small island, but let's not underestimate our impact or potential impact. We're a small island with 85,000 people, with a high GDP, with some fantastic wildlife ecosystems, people, businesses, organisations, etc. And me and others believe that the Isle of Man can absolutely be a global leader in terms of how a small island or an island can work sustainably. So there's some opportunities for us in the island, in the British Isles, but let's not underestimate how we can be a global example in terms of islands. So we've gone through our strategic process, and we aligned very much with this triangle. So this triangle was created in March. Just before lockdown, I went to a meeting of all the Wildlife Trust CEOs, and I think over 40 of the 46 turned up to a meeting in Bristol. And we went through, and at the end had complete consensus that these were the areas that wildlife trusts overall should be working towards. So in some ways that gave us a real top line banner to work to ourselves in terms of our strategy. So we have three clear strategic targets. The first of those is to drive the development of a nature recovery network across the Isle of Man, and I'll come back to that on my next slide. We want to champion nature-based solutions in the Isle of Man, so that's everything from tree planting for carbon offsetting, peatland restoration and maintenance, or even within the blue carbon sphere of seagrass. So very much how can we be, champion nature-based solutions. And then the third target, which for me rings true as a background in education and community engagement, is connecting people in the Isle of Man, and I'm going to say even more strongly, to nature. So there are three clear strategic targets going forward. In terms of a nature recovery network, our 24 Manx Wildlife Trust nature reserves are fantastic, and looking after them remains an absolute top priority for us, for Tricia, for our midweek muckers, and actually for all Manx Wildlife Trust staff. And certainly, linking more of what we do to our nature reserves is a top priority for me personally as we go forward. I think we've got some special places and we need to cherish them and appropriately engage people with them more. However, beyond that, our nature reserves are just 0.2% of the area of the Isle of Man. And Manx Wildlife Trust care about nature across the whole of the Isle of Man. So driving what we'd call, or what other people have termed, a green lace. So when I talk about a nature recovery network, imagine you add up our nature reserves and then you add in wildlife sites and potential action for wildlife sites, and then the national nature reserves, the land that's we already run for conservation through people like MNH and DEFRA, and then you can get into the world of private gardens. How can we actually get people in their private gardens to do more for nature and add to this green lace? And then fundamentally for us, and certainly for me, and I have some background in this, is that 88% of the area of the Isle of Man is agricultural land. Now, I know in some areas and in the past, the conservationists and agriculturist farmers have not always seen eye to eye, and certainly that's going to be we're not suddenly going to agree on everything. But working with farmers is fundamentally important for us going forward to try and influence positively, more conservation-minded behaviour across 88% of the Isle of Man. So we've already formed a close link with Manx National Farmers Union. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with them following inviting them to be part of our strategic planning process. And again, just to reiterate and have this out for public record, we and I know that we're not always going to agree with farmers. However, the potential gains, if we can encourage farmers to use less pesticides, use less fertilisers, and actually save themselves money in the process, because the profit is the key thing that drives farmers, and we need to have an empathy with that. But we need to encourage them to do it better. And I think the Isle of Man already has got a key stat that MNFU will champion, and they're right to, is that we have a greater length of hedgerows per acre, per hectare, than certainly far, far more than there is across in the UK. And we need to champion that. But maybe we can make them thicker. Maybe we can get more areas developed as wildlife sites. And these things are possible, and we've had some real enthusiastic conversations with MNFU, and I look forward to them going forward. And the launch of the new agri-environment scheme that's going to start early next year, we believe, launched by the government, that's a tremendous opportunity, and we in Manx National Farmers Union see that as something that we can really work closely with together. So partnerships and collaborations generally are important for us. So I've talked about MNFU. Our ambition is that we work closely with all the other key stakeholders, conservation organisations, etc. in the Isle of Man. And certainly, our work with the government is absolutely key, and we have regular meetings with them. And I've been delighted since I started in post to have had now several conversations with Edmund Southworth, the Chief Executive Director of Manx National Heritage, and through the work in the Calf of Man and through the work in the Currachs and education initiatives and a range of other projects, working with MNH and DEFRA are absolutely key to us. And then, of course, we've got a whole range of other, what I would call, conservation environmental organisations. And hopefully, as we go forward, I'll be able to, in some ways, tick them off and find ways that we can work closely with all of them through education, through potential funding bids, etc. And already we've got a memorandum of understanding with Manx Whale and Dolphin Watch. We're collaborating closely with them and have done for years on an adopt a dolphin scheme. And personally, I was delighted. I think it was last week to actually join one of their sessions at the Sound, looking for cetaceans, and we saw a couple. So brilliant. And I think that under my watch will be a really important way that Manx Wildlife Trust will work. We are and this isn't trying to big ourselves up. This is matter of fact. We are the largest in terms of staff, turnover, volunteers, nature reserves, etc. conservation organisation in the Isle of Man, and we cover everything. We have a badge with a turn-in, and we have a marine team and a terrestrial team, and we do inverts and we do education, etc. But we want to work with all the other conservation NGOs. So with cetaceans, of course, Lara will care about cetaceans, and when she's having discussions about marine nature reserves, they will be high on her thinking. However, Manx Whale and Dolphin Watch do a wonderful job, so why would we want to compete with them? We don't. We want to work closely with them. And I think that way of working is something that will enable us actually to do more with less effort. And maybe under the Biosphere banner, I see that personally as an enabler for collaboration, because we can do it under a Biosphere banner. So real opportunities. Money is not a dirty word. We are a charity. We need money to operate. Now, many people don't know this, and I'm keen that everyone does, that actually Manx Wildlife Trust last year traded on a deficit, and the reason we had a deficit is that we didn't get any significant legacies last year. Now, in previous years we've managed to get legacies, and that's helped balance the books for a financial year. Now, my personal view and the view of the Finance Committee and the Board is that we need to move away from that, and we need to get to a place where we have a sustainable annual operating budget. And then when we get legacies, which we absolutely hope we still do, that will enable us to do more, or will enable us to do things better. You know, more, maybe buy more land for nature reserves, maybe educate more people, etc., etc. So we need to get to a place where we can balance our books, and as Chief Executive, that's a job that I have to tackle with some gusto. So a business plan will certainly be following quickly out of our strategy, looking at more efficient ways of working, and driving up our fundraising office, and we have a great one. Team Manx Wildlife Trust. So this is a team photo, and it was actually taken, I think, in 2019-20 just. So it was before Ray had joined us in the new comms post. And this is the core staff team. We have a wonderful core staff team. I'm delighted to be part of it now. But our team, what we're calling Team Manx Wildlife Trust, is far more than our core staff. Our volunteers, as I've already mentioned many times now, are brilliant and do a huge amount of work. And without them, we would be struggling. So we're actually absolutely keen to develop that and give more opportunities for volunteers. So if you're hearing this or watching this and think you'd actually like to volunteer in a different way with us, ask the question. We're now looking at everything from painting and decorating to helping set up or help Charlotte with our financial accounting system, to more mucking, to maybe a group of weekend muckers, so that we can actually get more families and maybe younger people who are in full-time employment and can't work in the week, actually out helping us in nature on the weekend. So these are all things that we'd like to do. So be it volunteers, be it our members, be it our corporate members, even people that follow us on social media or advocate in conversations about they've been to Manx Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve or seen one of our interpretation panels and aren't we doing good work. It really does make a difference, and so we'd encourage you to stay part of that and encourage others to join us as well. So that's me done now. So I was keen to do a little bit to camera as part of the AGM. I wasn't sure when we planned this whether we'd still be in lockdown, but hopefully I put a few things on record. I'm absolutely delighted to be in my role in the Isle of Man. It's a very special place. I knew that before I came, and nothing I've seen subsequently has changed my mind, in fact more so. Thank you all for watching this if you've stayed through to the end, but thank you most of all for supporting Manx Wildlife Trust in the ways that you do. It's absolutely now a crucial time for the environment and for biodiversity, and so the work of Manx Wildlife Trust is a fundamental part in us in the island trying to do our bit to combat those losses. The Biosphere Banner gives us a real mandate to work together more, and I really come back to a point I said before, is that I think we could be a global example of how an island can operate sustainably, under the Biosphere Banner, all working together, everything from commerce to education. It wasn't me that set up the Biosphere Banner, but I champion it, and certainly Manx Wildlife Trust are looking forward to being part of that as we go forward to it being revalidated in a few years' time. I'm personally excited about all we can achieve, and so please stay with us on that journey, and please encourage more others to join our team as well. Thanks for watching.